Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the CBI's SME webinar, today focused on the net zero journey and delivered in partnership with our friends at BT. Now, the purpose of today is really to give you access to the CBI's monthly webinar, so welcome. Very, very pleased that you're here. And as I said, we're going to be looking at the net zero journey as we prepare for COP26 and beyond. It's also an opportunity for you to hear from expert speakers, and I'm delighted today to be joined by an all-female panel, very unusual, but very good to be here. What do we call all-male panels? They're manels, aren't they? I don't know what an all-female panel is. But our speakers, as I'll just take you around the room. We've got Gabrielle Ginner, who I hopefully have correctly pronounced your name, excellent, who is Head of Environmental Sustainability at BT. And Gabrielle will be talking around BT's journey and how they're working to support their suppliers in this space. We've also got Catherine Westerby from BEIS, and Catherine is leading the charge very much on the SME campaign for the government ahead of COP26. And finally, we have got Hannah Drake, who is Chief Executive of Analytic, a SME based up in the northwest of England, and she'll be looking at how SMEs can really lead the charge in terms of net zero. The person I haven't introduced is myself. So for those of you I haven't yet met, my name is Deborah Fraser and I'm Commercial Director for Regions and SMEs here at the CBI. Now, the format of today's session is as normal. I know you don't want to be hearing from me, so I will very soon put myself on mute. We will hear from each of our speakers in turn. During that, please go to the chat box and send in any questions, because once we've heard from each of them, we will be opening things up to a Q&A discussion. So please go to the chat box, send in your questions, and I will look to answer them. Again, if you've got any particular feedback or requests for further information that aren't covered off, put them in there, because we can make sure the team, which is headed up by Charlotte Thomason at the CBI, and Megan can make sure we do that as part of the follow-up. So as said, I promised I will put myself on mute, so I will do that. And Gabriella, delighted to have you here and to be working with BT on this. Thank you so much for your support. But if I could hand over to you now to talk us through the activity of BT.
Yeah, so just to start, I think for BT, taking action on climate is nothing new to us. We set our first carbon reduction target already back in 1992. We set our first science-based carbon reduction target in 2008, and that was really before people were thinking about linking science and climate reduction. And we thought science-based targets was a great idea, but at the time, unfortunately, not many people picked up on that. But as we now know, over 1,000 companies have set science-based targets. We have managed to reduce our carbon emissions intensity by over 80% in 2016. So we decided, I came back from Paris and we decided to be more ambitious. So we set a new science-based target aligned to 1.5 degree warming, and that is to reduce our carbon emissions by another 87% by the end of March 2031. And so how are we basically going to get there? I think we're looking at three key areas for BT. One is around purchasing renewable electricity. And I'm very proud to say that last year we hit our target to buy 100% renewable electricity worldwide. We're also looking at our biggest challenge, which is around how we are transforming our fleet. So BT and Openreach, we have the UK's second largest commercial fleet after Royal Mail. We have around 33,000 vehicles, and we're looking at, how can we go about decarbonizing those. In terms of working with suppliers, so if we look at BT's end-to-end carbon footprint, around 2/3 of that is from our supply chain. So which is why we partner with BEIS and with the SME Climate Hub to try and engage our suppliers to set net zero targets, because for us, obviously, that will reduce our carbon footprint. So we've done something around climate contracts. So we have built in a new contract clause into new contracts around, okay, if you're signing up to be a contractor to BT, you need to have a clause in there that says you're going to reduce your carbon emissions and your energy consumption. We work very closely with CDP, and we try to get companies just to start thinking about climate and climate action and what are your carbon emissions. We've sent out emails from our procurement department just asking companies, well, what are you doing in this space and how can we help? And we're also working with suppliers around innovation. So what new innovation can we see from you in terms of sustainability? So I think my key message really is around collaboration and how do we work with other companies and how do we work with government and policymakers to try and make this change and get more companies, small, large, whoever, to make that journey to net zero.
Great. Thank you, Gabrielle. It's really interesting, isn't it? It's in terms of that, and it maybe we could pick up a little bit on this later, but sort of that procurement piece. You know, if companies are wanting to win contracts, actually these are things that you're looking for in that tendering process, and maybe sort of what you might be looking for at the other end on the scoring in particular, just to give some tips to the SMEs who are listening here. Right. So thank you very much. Now I'm handing over to Catherine, who's going to be really talking us through the campaign that BEIS is leading and heading up as we're not too far, are we, from COP26 up in Glasgow. So Catherine, thank you. Over to you.
Thanks, Deborah. It is slightly scary to think that we're only 2 months out from COP26. So although we've achieved an awful lot through this campaign already, there's still a lot more to do. So it's fantastic that we're having this webinar today. Again, it's a great opportunity to reach out again and talk about the campaign. So hopefully many of you are already aware of the Global Race to Zero, which is the campaign ahead of COP26. So the government campaign is called the Together for Our Planet Business Climate Leaders campaign. So it's the same as the Race to Zero, completely aligned. It's just, again, what we're calling it within the UK. And within that, we have a public engagement strand, so that's focused on One Step Greener, and then a business engagement strand, which I'm obviously heading up on the small business side. So Andrew Griffith is our next our net zero champion ahead of COP26. He was appointed by the PM back in November last year. And within Andrew's remit, there are sort of 3 broad strands, one of which is what we call the big business campaigns. That's engaging the FTSE 100. We've got almost half, I can say with confidence, signed up to the Race to Zero already, again, which is a fantastic achievement. I head up the small and micro business campaign, and that's all about mass mobilisation. How do we engage the 99% of the UK business community that are comprised of small and medium-sized enterprises? And our campaign is very much focused on ordinary small and micro businesses, those businesses who don't necessarily know what net zero means for them as a business. So this campaign, again, is all about raising awareness. And then the third strand is the Global Investment Summit that's happening just before COP and is being led by the Department for International Trade. So in terms of the business sort of campaign objectives, so first off, we really do want to raise awareness of climate change. We know from our research and our extensive engagement with small businesses that they care about climate change, that it is an issue that's important to them. It might not be very top of the list, but it's definitely a concern. The key issue, obviously, is sort of moving from that concern to action. So what is it that net zero actually means for businesses, and what can they do? Most importantly, what is it that a small business on your local high street can actually do? Not just to reduce their emissions, but to be part of COP itself, you know, to be part of this movement that we're trying to generate ahead of COP, to get that sort of mass mobilisation, that mass engagement on net zero and what it means for the business community. So once we've done that and raised awareness, we really want to encourage the uptake of specific actions, again, making net zero really meaningful for small businesses. You know, what exactly is it that you're going to have to do as a business? Well, here's some suggestions. Again, we're not sort of mandating any of this. It's very much about sort of setting out our stalls, saying, here's some options, here's a menu of choices of things that you may want to consider, depending on your type of business, depending on where you are on your net zero journey. And we do appreciate, again, that many businesses will just be taking that first step. So importantly, that very first step is to join the Race to Zero via the SME Climate Hub. I'll talk about that in just a second. And as part of the campaign, again, we're generating a lot of place-based interest in engagement, press coverage, working with local authorities, etc., really spreading this campaign far and wide. So the campaign itself was officially launched on the 28th of May by the Prime Minister. So it's fantastic to get his involvement in this at such an early stage. It was launched by a garden party where we had a selection of small businesses representing different sectors in different parts of the UK. So they got to meet the PM and again showcase their business. As part of this campaign, we really want businesses to be proud of their achievements, even if they have just taken a few small, short steps to start their net zero journey. This campaign is all about them. It's all about placing them front and centre and showing what can be done, especially in the wake of the pandemic. So in terms of our sort of broad campaign overview, there's a national engagement element. So we're working really closely with our fantastic supporters, including BT, Gabrielle here, and other supporters, including Google, Amazon, Severn Trent, Royal Mail, for example. We've got a whole host of fantastic supporters on board, and they're helping us spread the word. So again, looking at the mass mobilisation element of this campaign, it's about putting it on the doorsteps. And how do we do that? We use Royal Mail, for example, or we contact small businesses via their utility providers, via their bank accounts, etc. So there are all sorts of channels that we can use, again, just to really spread the word about the race to zero and show businesses, again, how they can benefit from net zero. This campaign is all about demonstrating that businesses could be missing out if they don't take a few really simple steps to reduce their emissions and save money. So again, we've got a host of regional engagement events planned. We've held one in Stoke-on-Trent, for example, Northern Powerhouse, Northern Ireland and the South West. So again, making sure that we're engaging businesses where they are in their local area. That's really, really important to us. So the centre point of our campaign, before I finish, is it's focused on the SME Climate Hub. So that is part of the global Race to Zero. It's an international platform that we work very, very closely with, and what we've done is create a new UK landing page on that site. So again, that's the focal point of our campaign. I can share a link in the chat afterwards, but just to say that's what we really want businesses to do, is visit the Business Climate Hub on the SME Climate Hub to sign up and make the SME climate commitment. It's a really, really short form. It couldn't be simpler. We ask for some very basic details, and all businesses need to do at this stage is, again, commit in principle to halving their emissions by 2030 at the latest, achieving net zero by 2050 at the latest. And again, I do appreciate that those targets sound really far off, but businesses have flexibility within that to set their own targets. Again, as long as it's within that sort of framework, businesses again have the freedom to say, look, this is my own target, this is what suits me. I'm committed again to reaching net zero. So that's what we're looking for to get that sort of mass mobilization. So again, I'll finish there and hand back to you, Deborah.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you. Yeah, and absolutely, we'll make sure we get that link circulated in the follow-up to this. Lots of questions starting to pop through actually in relation to that. So what we will do before we go to the questions is hear from Hannah, who is actually helping leading this charge, being an SME up in the Northwest. So Hannah, can you talk us through how you see SMEs playing its part in the race to net zero?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would split it up into 4 categories, really. Kind of understanding your target, set your target, set something that's ambitious yet realistic. Catherine mentioned kind of halving your emissions within the next 10 years, which I think is very sensible. And if you split that up, you're looking at kind of 7% reduction in emissions year on year, which I think is achievable. But being able to measure and analyse, understand your data, I think is one of the most key areas. It's collecting that data, having a good understanding before you can start implementing any changes within the business. And then we look at reducing emissions. So look at the low-hanging fruit. Can you look at renewable, convert into a renewable energy product? Can you implement any on-site generation on site? Can you look at cycle to work schemes? So things that you can do, I suppose, today as a business, and then look at setting yourself targets as a business further down the line. So can you look at installing on-site generation, for example, and then looking at your supply chain. SMEs will have more of a less of an impact on the larger supply chain, I guess. But one thing Gabrielle mentioned earlier is that collaboration. So speak to your supply chain, make sure that as a collective that you've got plans, you can do things together to further reduce emissions. And I would start personally with being in an energy background is look at things you can do from an energy perspective. So look at renewable technology, renewable sources. Can you have any incentive schemes in place for staff? Look at staff behaviour. Is there anything that within your organisation that you can look at making sure they turn the lights off after work? Simple things, but they all equate to a bigger part towards reducing your emissions.
Thank you, Hannah. Some really, some, as you say, going back to that Catherine's point around those simple steps. Catherine, just on that, and it's perhaps related to Hannah's point around, how measure and analyse data. I'm a business. How do I even start thinking about that? Is there any support? Is there anything available to help me just even start to process? And because if we don't know where to measure, we don't know how we reduce, do we? So, is there really keen to hear any sort of thoughts on where businesses can get that support and advice on how to measure?
Absolutely, and it is a really crucial question. Again, just as you say, you can't measure what you can't manage. You can't manage what you can't measure, rather. So it's all about just making sure that businesses have the tools and resources available. So on the SME Climate Hub, that sort of primary site that I mentioned, there's a tools library, and we work very closely again to make sure that that's updated, to make sure that the information is accessible to businesses. But there's an awful lot of information on there again, which we're looking to sort of again revise constantly and make sure we've got the best tools and updates on there. So we appreciate that one size doesn't fit all. So we've been asked before to produce a template, for example, for businesses, and we're reluctant to do that because, again, businesses are so different depending on their sector. A small restaurant firm is obviously going to be different to a small law firm. So we want to make sure, again, that we've got that sort of breadth of advice that's, again, easy and accessible. So I would recommend businesses go to the tools library on the SME Climate Hub and see what's there, see what suits them. And again, it's constantly being updated with new tools and advice, new carbon calculators, for example.
Yeah, so Deborah, one thing that I would recommend, so we work very closely with the Carbon Trust. So the Carbon Trust has a guide for SMEs on how to look at your carbon footprint and how to measure it.
Great. That would be, yes. So I think Charlotte and Megan in the background, if we can make sure we get that link in and do that as part of the follow-up as well, that would be really helpful. So Gabrielle and Hannah, I might come to you in turn, but I think it's just that piece around winning contracts, and there is a question just coming in. It's like, what are the things that we should, if we are tendering for work with, bigger companies, what are the things that you will be looking for? And I think, and then Hannah, maybe we can come to you in terms of, how you think and respond perhaps to winning contracts, but also, if you are dealing with your supply chain, and it might be you're dealing with micro companies in your supply chain and encouraging them, how do you start to have those conversations? Because net zero it's reliant on the big companies doing their part, but also right the way through to, as Catherine's talked about, the micro companies, and it being everybody's responsibility. So Gabrielle, perhaps you could talk about it from when larger companies are procuring, what are you looking for? How can SMEs get themselves in the best possible place?
Yeah, so we sent out a survey to hundreds of suppliers, basically asking, do you have a net zero target? And if they said no, we followed up with all of them to try and understand why they didn't. 15% now of BT purchasing criteria is linked to what companies do on CSR issues. So I think it's definitely something that I think companies will start looking for. What are you doing? We want to know. And if you don't have a net zero target, why don't you? And how can we help you?
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I'd say that. So we're doing very similar things, but also working with other businesses to say what can we do together. And I think for us to achieve anything, in the UK, for us to achieve net zero, we need to start working together. All businesses can be doing more, but I think it always helps if you work together on a project, and that we can do something as a collective there. So we with anybody we're speaking to, and we're still a very new business, but anyone that we speak to, any business that we speak to, one of the first things we ask is, do you have a net zero plan in place? What are you doing to reduce emissions? What are you doing to achieve your targets?
Great, thank you. And Catherine, perhaps coming back to you. I mean, you talked around, every part, you've done roadshows and activities in every part of the UK. Can you give us a sense of how the UK, if there's different parts that perhaps are doing better at this, you want to say better, but sort of further down the road, further along the journey, and what opportunities there might be, in terms of sort of further engagement in activities going forward?
Yeah, definitely. And again, everyone is definitely playing their part, so we wouldn't want to suggest that there are any sort of particular laggards. But absolutely, in terms of different parts of the UK who are sort of forging ahead, Scotland is doing really, really well. The Southwest is doing particularly well. I think we've got them on around 14% at the minute of our total sign-ups, and of course London is naturally forging the way because obviously the density of businesses there. So it's really exciting again to see that some parts of the UK are just it's really working. They're so engaged on net zero, and there are other parts where obviously we could do more. Again, focusing our efforts on engaging them in their local communities. And again, I mentioned the range of supporters that we're working with on this campaign. So one of our campaign supporters is Planet Mark, and they're running a zero carbon battle bus tour, which is, I promise you, as exciting as it sounds. And they're doing sort of regional stop-ups on the way. So they have lots and lots of different regional engagement events where they will, to tour the bus from Scotland to Glasgow. And we're obviously supporting them on that, going along to those events and speaking where possible. So it's just a great opportunity, again, to sort of see the sort of tangible excitement, the tangible sort of effects of this campaign, where we're reaching down into those local communities. They're able to see, the battle bus in action, to understand what zero carbon could mean for them. And again, just working really closely with local enterprise partnerships, with the devolved administrations. I've mentioned Scotland already. We work very closely with Welsh and Northern Irish stakeholders as well. So again, very keen to do everything we can to reach out as far and wide as possible, and make sure, importantly, not just that we're taking this campaign to small businesses, but that we're using this as an opportunity to listen to them as well. So learning, what is it that they need from government? What is it that this, campaign could evolve into? And really taking that on board and helping shape the next phase of our engagement.
And in terms of an opportunity, I mean, we talked earlier before we sort of came on this call around sort of showcasing good practice and best practice. What opportunity? I mean, when you've worked hard at something, it's nice to to celebrate it and be inspiration for others. Are there any opportunities for businesses to really showcase what they're doing through the BASE campaign?
Definitely, excitingly, we're about to launch the Heroes of Net Zero Award, if it hasn't already.
I didn't know that, by the way, when I asked the question.
Yeah, no, there we go. This is a brand new announcement, which is fantastic.
It's really, really exciting. So really glad we could get this out. And again, that's really the key opportunity for businesses to showcase what they've been doing, to tell us about it, because we don't, unless you tell us, we're not necessarily going to find out about all these fantastic achievements. So we really want businesses to participate in this competition. There's a fantastic prize package that's been pulled together, again, with support from BT. So it's absolutely fantastic. And we'd encourage every business who started the net zero journey. Again, you don't have to be too far along the line. It's about focusing on innovation, sort of small everyday innovations that businesses do all the time to improve their business. What is it that you've done to start your net zero journey, to cut your emissions? And obviously, a large part of this campaign is about peer-to-peer action. So we really do want to use case studies in particular. We have a call for case studies. I think we've got 75 at the minute, again, representing different sectors, different parts of the UK, all sorts of different businesses. It's just really exciting to see what's out there, from small coffee shops to care homes.
No, exactly. And just, to on Catherine's point, as BT, we're very excited to be part of this campaign and basically shining a light on, key small businesses doing their thing around net zero. And I think it's going to be a very exciting competition that will be launched, and we're so excited to be part of it.
Great. I think everyone will be interested to know what the prizes are as well. Right, I've got a question here. Can a small can a small trader, for example, a painter or decorator, sign up to the net zero plan? I think we probably.
Yes, absolutely. Again, it's such a simple form. It won't take any time at all, and you have to, again, just commit in principle to the principles I outlined on net zero.
Great. Now there is we've got a bit more of a slightly gnarly question here. Right, sorry. How is the question? Sorry, it just come through from Shahin. How does that painter or decorator sign up? I'm guessing going to your webpage, filling out the form, and what we'll do is Shahin, we'll make sure that's link sent out. So Catherine will provide that, and we'll do that as part of the follow up. Now we've got another one from Sarah, who asked a bit of a gnarly question, and I've looked for volunteers. How do you distinguish between carbon neutrality and net zero? So that's somebody who's obviously starting to think about this in greater detail.
I can jump in and start, and I'm happy to hand over to Gabrielle or Hannah. I mean, the problem is that there's so much different terminology that's in use at the minute, and lots and lots of jargon. So what we're trying to do through this campaign, again, is make sure that we're making that clear. So carbon neutrality, again, is focused on becoming carbon neutral. So achieving a balance between the carbon that you emit and the carbon, obviously, that you prevent. So And net zero obviously is much, much broader. It refers to a range of greenhouse gas emissions that contribute to global warming. So net zero in terms of emissions, again, is achieving that balance. So broadly speaking, I would say they're both very similar terms, one focused on carbon, one focused on the sort of the broader emission spectrum. But it's all about achieving that balance and bringing that down to zero so that you only emit as much as you take back from the atmosphere.
No, exactly. As Catherine said, it's about looking at your emissions and how you balance that from what you're taking away.
Thank you. And another follow-up question we've got, what is the link overlap between net zero targets and science-based targets? So I think you're absolutely right, Catherine. There's a lot of terminology in this, isn't there? And it's unpicking and that jargon buster. Is there a jargon buster on the webpage?
There is.
Excellent.
There is. Yeah, exactly. There is actually.
Excellent. But perhaps Gabrielle, Hannah, where do you see that overlap between net zero targets and science-based targets?
Catherine, I think you might be better explaining than I am.
Yeah.
I didn't want to dominate the conversation, but absolutely. So science-based targets is obviously, well, the Science-Based Target Initiative is obviously part of the Race to Zero. So I mentioned before that there are lots of different ways in to the Race to Zero, which is this sort of global umbrella initiative. So one way in, for example, is through the Science-Based Targets Initiative. It's generally speaking targeted at larger companies who obviously, I think they pay around $5,000 and they get sort of their emissions plans sort of codified by the Science-Based Targets Initiative. So it's incredibly rigorous. Again, it's in line with science-based targets, so achieving in line with the 1.5 degree limit that we need to set on climate change. So it's very, very rigorous. And again, we would encourage all large corporations to sign up to that, because again, it's a drop in the ocean compared to what they would spend on other things. And we fully support them, again, putting forward those really rigorous targets. And then, as I say, there are lots of different ways into the Race to Zero. For other types of business, you pick and choose which one suits you. We have the exponential roadmap for 1.5, for example, the Science-Based Targets Initiative, CDP, or what was formerly known as the Carbon Disclosure Project. So there are lots of different options for businesses looking to join the Race to Zero. And again, the SME Climate Hub is the portal for small businesses to do so. So it's not quite as rigorous. It's completely free for small businesses as well. But again, it's definitely aligned with the Race to Zero and completely, again, in line with what we need to achieve ahead of COP.
I'd probably say as well, we're talking about the targets, but I mentioned earlier being able to understand the data, collect that data, because it's all well and good setting targets, but knowing what where you are and how you're going to get there, I think is absolutely essential. So make sure you are starting to collect data, that you have a good understanding of that data, and then you've got plans in place to start reducing emissions and identifying areas in which you can start reducing those as well.
Okay, got another question coming, which is really around buy-in, and it's how do I'm a company, how do I get buy-in across, and I'm it's not specific there whether it's colleagues, it's other boards, it's customers, but perhaps if you could talk through, perhaps in the broader sense, how do you get buy-in for companies in terms of tackling net zero? I think Gabrielle, you've talked around is actually, do you know what,
Yeah.
we're going to be looking at this if you're going to procure, if you want to work for us, you're going to have there's a pure economic case. But I wonder if perhaps you could spend a bit of time, each of you, just unpicking how you can secure that buy-in.
Yeah, no, so I've been in this role for BT for 12 years, and when I started to talk to our board about climate change, it was like, what is she talking about, right? And I think in the last couple of years, a few things have happened. Basically, we've seen Greta, we've seen Extinction Rebellion, we've had Extinction Rebellion outside our office, and I think, climate change is happening. We're seeing the flooding, we're seeing the warming, it's here. And I think for a board, just to say, yes, we have wildfires, we have climate change happening, it's affecting our company, we need to do something about it. So I think kind of the external mood has made a big impact in terms of, yes, this is something that companies need to care about.
I'd say as well, making sure that everyone within the organisation is aligned with what you're trying to do with the strategy, that they've got, maybe incentive schemes for your employees to make sure that within your own organisation you can be doing things. So making sure that everyone within your organisation is a part of the whole, part of the whole picture, is a part of the whole strategy. Because from the bottom to the top, everybody should be doing their bit to help achieve the targets that you've got in place.
Yeah, and just to Hannah's point, so we changed our bonus strategy last year. So now 10% of BT manager bonuses is linked to how we're doing on our carbon decarbonisation plan and digital skills. So, now everybody knows that, yes, this is part of our bonus and what we're doing on this.
Thank you, and I think yes, it's that does incentivize people, doesn't it? So there's a question here, and this probably is, Catherine, is to you. How do we influence policy to accelerate this change? How can obviously get involved with the CBI, help us lobby, but if a business is really keen to accelerate policy change, is there ways that you think that they could get involved in the debate, in the conversation?
Definitely, that's normally through talking to me. So more than happy to have those conversations individually with businesses. Again, we reach out via these events that we're hosting, working in conjunction with various campaign supporters. But I would just say, the way that we're really going to show, that the UK is leading, and just to point out that we've got over 1,600 small businesses signed up to the SME Climate Hub. We can do better than that. We can do more than that. The way that we're going to influence policy is to demonstrate that groundswell, that demand that exists in the UK for the government to go further and faster. And we're very receptive to that. Again, that's what's quite exciting about going out and speaking to businesses, is that they want us to do more constantly. They want us to provide that roadmap for them. And that's, again, what we're doing with the net zero strategy that's due to be released just before COP. Again, putting those roadmaps into action, saying, look, this is what we're going to do to support you along your net zero journey. This is the direction the UK is taking from a policy perspective. So all of this action that we're trying to generate ahead of COP is absolutely laying the foundation, the groundwork for better policy, for stronger policy, faster policy after COP, to make sure, again, that we're doing everything we can to support the UK business community in their journey to net zero.
And I think that's so important, which I think is why, as BT, we were one of the founding partners of the SME Climate Hub. We just really want to, create that groundswell. We want to inspire other people to come with us on that journey, because we're so much stronger if we have so many more businesses signed up to this and saying, yeah, this is the direction that we want to go. So in terms of policy, yes, do help us, but we're fully supportive of the government. And yeah, let's get more people to join us on this journey.
Great. And just in terms of, I suppose, COVID, I mean, how is it? I mean, we know in some sense, we've seen, obviously during lockdown, pollution was massively reduced. But I mean, Catherine, how is that COVID and the pandemic? How's that impacted on the sort of race to net zero?
That's a really good question. I think we were sort of quite tentative at the start of the campaign. We didn't want to push too hard, because obviously we appreciated fully that small businesses, again, looking back to last November, were sort of in the thick of it. We're really struggling and have obviously suffered enormously over the past 18 months. So we didn't want to come in too strongly. But I think the key message that we really want to get across through this campaign, that we've been communicating for the best part of the year, is that net zero is the way to recovery, that it's all about recovering in a green way. And the last thing we want is for businesses, many of who have adopted net zero friendly practices, for example, working from home when they can, that's cut their transport emissions. It's something that they were almost forced to do, but again has had a really positive effect on reducing their emissions, almost overnight. So it's fantastic that we can identify these behaviours, some of which were really positive, and that we want to sort of retain to a certain degree going forwards. And I think, again, the key message is that we want businesses to build back greener, to really understand that net zero is the way forward. Again, it's the only direction of travel. It's, we're going to potentially be introducing regulation, for example, on EPCs and clean heat in the future. So we want businesses to be prepared. This is their moment to say, I'm going to recover, I'm going to become a net zero business. This is, again, a step along that journey for me. I'm not going to go back to those old polluting practices. I'm going to rethink my business. Now is absolutely the time to do that.
And I suppose perhaps a follow-up question to that, how do you, in uncertain times, let's be honest, it's still uncertain, when we think about it, how do you, and perhaps each of you could take this in turn, but think about how you future-proof your plans in an uncertain world. Hannah, perhaps I could. Sorry, Gabrielle. Let's go to you first.
I think that's a valid question, and that's something that we are doing at BT. So we need to think about, we are seeing, as I said, we see climate change is happening. We're seeing flooding. So we are looking at, how do we protect our key infrastructure for the UK? So how do we build our flood defences? How do we protect our exchanges? And that's very much in terms of our forward planning, and also in terms of the supply chain, right? So, how do we start thinking about supply chain and the risks that we have seen in Asia due to flooding and due to COVID and, supply issues? It's just I think all companies should start thinking about how do we forward-proof our business.
Yes, it's interesting because we had we had a session previously on insurance, and actually that sort of thinking about environmental disasters and environment, or not even disasters, just those shifts that we are seeing. Anybody who's loves the countryside or does gardening is pretty clear to see those shifts are happening, and how do you adapt to that? Hannah, have you got any thoughts on how you think about that future proofing? And then Catherine, I'll come to you.
Yeah, I mean, the pandemic opened everybody's eyes, I think, to the environment. You'd walk down the street and you wouldn't hear anything but birds singing, and I think it made everybody realise the impact of not having as many cars on the roads, and you see huge pieces of machinery not being used, which is terrible for the business, but you also see the impact that it had on the environment. But I think because everybody had their eyes opened, everybody will have the same interest, I suppose, the same goals. So I suppose it's making sure that we keep that collaborative approach with anybody that we work with. We're not in this on our own, we're in this together. And I think making sure that going forward, whenever you're dealing with new businesses or any existing businesses that you're dealing with, that we can do something together to make change.
Catherine, coming to you for final thoughts on that.
Yeah, exactly. And again, the core message of this campaign is that net zero is good for business. So it helps you become more resilient. You become more efficient. It's about finding out, where you're spending too much on energy, for example. Can you save money by, again, switching to a different supplier, or simply turning off your light bulbs? Again, we've been talking about this for years in the environmental policy field, but it really is something that's such a simple action. And it's just about, giving up businesses this opportunity, again, when they're looking to sort of reassess and build back after the, following obviously the struggles of the past 18 months, is to say, look, this can make you more efficient. This can make you a better business, and a more efficient business is obviously going to be more resilient and is going to have, a better chance of surviving future shocks if, again, you're sort of working as tightly and as resiliently, as efficiently as possible.
Thank you. Right, I'm just conscious of time. What I might do is just a very quick fire. If you were talking to SMEs and you were to give them one top tip in terms of thinking about the sort of getting onto that net zero journey, what would be the one tip you would give? So I'm going to go Catherine, Hannah, and then Gabrielle. Gabrielle, hopefully no one steals all your ideas.
That's always the problem with being last.
I know.
Right?
Come up with 3 just to be on the safe side.
Definitely. I would say, again, don't be afraid. Think about what you can achieve as a small business and make the SME climate commitment. That really is the first step to, just commit in principle, have a look at all the tools and resources that are available on the SME Climate Hub, and just take that first step.
Great. And it does sound like there's lots of resource.
Data.
Sorry, Hannah.
Understand your data, measure everything, and then track where you are and make sure you're communicating with all key stakeholders to where you are against those targets.
Yeah, great.
So I think maybe I might be a bit more personal because this is my job, but I think for anyone who's thinking about this, being part of this community is very exciting, and it's very exciting for your company, for you personally, to be part of something a lot bigger. And that, that's what I do, my job, It's because, yes, I feel that I can make a change to my company. I can make a change maybe to the UK, maybe to small businesses. So I would encourage everybody just to say, yeah, you know, this is something that I own, and this is something that I want to do in terms of me.
Thank you, Gabrielle. That's really powerful, and I think you're absolutely right. It is everybody's responsibility, and this is it's not something any of us can shirk. We need to embrace and make our own and see how we can contribute. Right, I'm conscious of time, and at the CBI we always like to finish on time. So really, thank you very much to Catherine, Hannah, and Gabrielle, and very kindly to BT for supporting this event and helping, making sure we got Catherine here, who has been a fountain of knowledge, and Hannah keeping our feet to the fire on those, making sure we do that measurement piece. So thank you very much, Gabrielle. We will be back here in a month's time, topic to be decided, but it will send that detail through, and look out for that follow-up email, and we'll make sure all of the resources that have been talked about in today's session, whether you're starting the journey or you're further down the road, it will be incredibly helpful. So thank you very much. Take care, everyone, and hope to see you soon.